Imagine a car inspection so difficult that it forces drivers to turn into mini mechanics. We're talking about the dreaded shaken inspection in Japan, and the reason why their cars are nearly indestructible. So, if you want to learn their secrets and make your car reach 1,000,000 miles, keep watching. At the end, I'll share a tip that saves drivers an average of $6,000 in repairs. But first, let's begin with a secret that can triple your car's lifespan. Secret number 17. Progressive warm-up before driving. Do you ever get into your car and immediately start driving as fast as you can? Surprise, surprise, that habit is killing your car. According to data from Japanese fleets, cars that are warmed properly last up to 3 times as long as those that are not. Revving a cold engine doesn't give oil enough time to circulate and for metals to warm up and expand. Cold engine oil typically needs 10 to 30 seconds to reach the camshaft, piston rings, bearings, and turbo if present. So when you cold rev, you are creating a lot of metal-to-metal contact. This will cause piston scuffing, which is when pistons scrape against the cylinder walls. Over time, both components will be severely damaged and cause engine failure. But the real nightmare is when bearings collide with the crankshaft. Do this one too many times and you'll end up with seized bearings and have to rebuild your engine. You're looking at well over $5,000 in damages. Here is how to properly warm up your vehicle and prevent engine failure. In winter, wait for about 30 seconds before you pull the car out of the driveway. In summer, you can start moving as soon as your seatbelt clicks. But don't step on the gas too harshly. Keep your revs under 2,500 RPM for the first 5 miles. Now that your engine is properly warm, don't go crazy until you see point number 7. Secret number 16. Oil changes based on use, not just mileage. Have you ever wondered why mechanics recommend 5K mile oil changes and car makers recommend 10? That's because we're the ones fixing the cars. Over 70% of cars that need major engine repair after 125,000 miles followed the manufacturer's advice. In fairness, most people don't actually know what their manual says. Instead of looking at the regular service schedule that says to change oil every 10 or 15,000 miles, look at the severe service schedule. The severe schedule is for anyone who drives in extreme weather, areas with heavy pollution or dust, stop-and-go traffic, and journeys under 4 miles. That is why the Japanese secret is to change oil every 10,000 kilometers or 6,200 miles if you do a lot of highway driving. But if you spend more time in the city, change oil every 7,000 kilometers or 4,300 miles. However, that's not where it stops. Based on different factors like driving habits, heat, or road conditions, oil could break down even faster. That is why you should change oil based on use, not just mileage. Once a month, perform a drop test. Place a drop of oil from the dipstick onto a piece of paper. If the oil spreads out with a clean, light brown appearance, it's fine. But if it's dark and doesn't spread much, it's time for a change. If you've been diligent with oil changes, don't get ahead of yourself just yet. We've still got more fluids to check. Secret number 15. Regular fluid checks. Most people claim to check their oil level every month. But when was the last time you checked the brake, transmission, power steering fluid, and coolant levels? For bonus points, what about windshield washer fluid? It literally takes just 5 minutes to check these, but this alone prevents up to 90% of major breakdowns. You should check the engine oil level once a month while the engine is cold. This will give the most accurate reading. Otherwise, check it 10 minutes after driving. That's also the time to check transmission and power steering fluid, which should also be done monthly. If any of these is much darker in color, consult an expert. If it's low, top it up with the same exact fluid. Don't mix brands or different types of fluids. Next, you need to check the coolant and brake fluid twice a year. However, you should check all of these before every long journey and at the first sign of trouble. So, if you have problems accelerating, are hearing strange noises, or fuel economy falls, check your fluids. While you're at it, you need to do the next thing too. Secret number 14, early air and fuel filter changes. Here is another section in your manual you need to ignore completely. Most manufacturers recommend engine air filter changes every 30,000 miles to 45,000 miles. For fuel filters, the recommendation ranges from 30,000 miles to not at all. That's because some manufacturers, like Ford, install what they call lifetime filters. However, that name is misleading. The filters only last as long as the fuel pump does, and vice versa. The life expectancy of those filters is closer to 50,000 miles. Whether it's a lifetime filter or a regular filter, you have to go with what experts recommend and not the manufacturer. This means engine air filter changes every 15,000 miles or once a year. Fuel filters should be changed every 20,000 miles or every 2 years. But just like with oil, don't depend on mileage. If your filter is dirty, replace it. Using clogged filters will affect the air-fuel ratio, both of which affect fuel economy, engine performance, and longevity. Running rich will eventually damage the catalytic converter and cause fuel wash. On the other hand, lean conditions increase combustion temperatures and can melt pistons. In other words, not replacing a $20 filter can cause over $2,000 in repairs. But get this, the next hack can save you from catastrophic engine failure and is even cheaper than a filter. Secret number 13. Clean intake system every 25,000 miles. Imagine if you never cleaned your nostrils. Every bit of dust, pollen, and bacteria just hangs onto your nose hairs forever. That's a recipe for illness, and that's what many drivers are doing to their cars. The air intake system works to bring oxygen into the engine for combustion. Over time, carbon and dirt deposits build up in the throttle body and intake valve. Dirt and debris also clog the air filter, which we've already discussed, and the mass flow sensor. Without sufficient oxygen and a faulty mass flow sensor, the engine will run rich. You will experience rough idling, poor acceleration, power loss, misfires, and reduced fuel economy. If the valve on the throttle body gets stuck closed, the car can stall during acceleration. Forget an expensive engine rebuild. You could be in a deadly collision. That is why you should clean the intake system every 25,000 miles. However, you can push this to every 30,000 miles if you also do the next thing. Secret number 12. Only use high-quality fuel. Did you know that car manufacturers don't encourage standard gasoline? Gasoline that meets the EPA's minimum standards doesn't contain enough detergent. That is why carbon builds up on critical engine components in as little as 10,000 miles. That is why every 50,000 miles, you need to have your fuel injectors professionally cleaned. This can cost anywhere from $500 to $1,000. You'll also need to clean piston crowns, cylinder heads, and intake valves. Over time, these add up to thousands of dollars. There are 2 simple ways to cut down the cost. The first is to use fuel additives every 3,000 to 10,000 miles. And yes, we know that some additives are snake oil. That's why we've compiled a list of fuel system cleaners you can trust. 13 engine additives that work, and 5 that'll kill your car. The second way to keep your engine clean is to use top-tier fuel. It contains extra additives and detergents proven to cut down carbon buildup. It results in 19 times fewer intake valve deposits and boosts fuel economy by up to 4%. It will also prevent expensive fuel system cleaning down the line and boost your chances of reaching 1 million miles. Secret number 11. Battery terminal maintenance. Did you know that Japanese cars can fail the shaken inspection if there's corrosion on the battery terminal? Yup, that whitish-green powder you've been seeing in your battery can cost owners in Japan a $500 hit. As your battery gets older, hydrogen gas from the battery acid reacts with the metal terminals. This corrosion, or what many refer to as rust, prevents your battery from charging to discharging properly. This puts all of your electrical systems in jeopardy. Sensors will malfunction, engine performance will drop, and the car might not even start. Ignore this for too long, and you'll spend over $1,000 on a new alternator, starter, and battery. That is why you need to clean the corrosion immediately. Disconnect the battery and apply a mixture of baking soda and water to neutralize the corrosion. After it fizzes, scrub off the powder using a wire brush or toothbrush. Next, rinse it off with water and dry the battery. Apply a thin layer of Vaseline to prevent further corrosion before reconnecting the battery. This takes less than 30 minutes and costs less than $1, but can save you thousands. Secret number 10. Preventive replacement of belts and tensioners. The adage, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, doesn't apply to your engine's belts. Most drivers will even ignore a squealing belt as long as the car is still driving fine. But belts are like the spine of the car. Once they snap, your car is crippled. The serpentine belt holds your alternator, AC compressor, power steering pump, and water pump together. When this snaps, it is difficult to steer. Your car overheats, and your AC stops working. When the timing belt breaks, pistons slam into valves. That means that if either of these belts should slip or snap, you could be facing a full engine rebuild. A typical serpentine belt will last between 50,000 and 100,000 miles. Timing belts also have a lifespan of between 60 and 100,000 miles, or 5 to 7 years. That is why you need to inspect your belts and tensioners every 30,000 miles and have them replaced at 50,000 miles. This might cost you over $1,000, but it's cheaper than buying a new engine. Secret number 9. Frequent tire checks. Did you know that tire failure is the leading cause of accidents and breakdowns? This amounts to over 11,000 crashed and 700 fatalities every year. And no, this isn't due to defective tires, but rather poor driving habits. For starters, most people don't pump their tires to the right PSI. According to the NHTSA, only 19% of drivers properly inflate their tires. Most people go by the number on the sidewall of the tire. However, that shows the maximum PSI of the tire, not what is recommended for your car. That number is on a sticker located on the driver's side door jamb. Another mistake people make is not getting their wheels aligned and rotating their tires. They also don't adjust PSI during winter or use the right tires for different seasons. Besides accident prevention, proper tire habits maximize fuel economy, protect your suspension, transmission, and warranty. Watch this video to discover 17 car tire mistakes you're making right now. Secret number 8. Cooling system care. Nearly 50% of all engine failures are linked to problems with the cooling system. In fact, some studies estimate it to be the #1 cause of catastrophic engine failure. That's because cars generate a tremendous amount of heat, even with the coolant in full effect. The combustion chamber generates up to 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit. To prevent irreparable damage to the engine, the coolant, thermostat, water pump, and radiator must work perfectly. Besides checking the coolant level every month, You should inspect the cooling system every 6 months. If your coolant smells sweet like maple syrup or candy, it means you have a leak. You should also inspect hoses for signs of wear or leaks and keep the radiator clean. Also, check the radiator cap for rust or damage. You should also bleed the radiator as often as recommended in your manual. For some cars, this is every 6 months. Ignoring any of these can lead to engine damage that can cost well over $5,000 to repair. And finally, perform a coolant flush every 30,000 miles. However, none of these will make a difference if you don't obey the next rule. Secret number 7. Avoid harsh driving. According to insurance companies, drivers who accelerate and brake harshly spend 30% more on repairs. That extra money goes towards replacing brake pads, tires, and engines. And get this, the U.S. Department of Energy says harsh driving increases fuel consumption in the city by up to 30%. In highway driving, the cost shoots up by an extra 40%. This means that you're costing yourself an extra $600 to $1,000 in maintenance and fuel costs per year, based on average annual figures. And let's not forget the increased accident risk. Other habits like rapid cornering and speeding over bumps also affect shocks, struts, and ball joints. You're also putting more stress on fuel injectors and burning oil quickly, which can cause sludge buildup. Fleet vehicle studies show that harsh driving will shorten your car's lifespan by 20 to 40%. This doesn't mean you should never drive at highway speeds. In fact, an Italian tune-up is good for the engine, but avoid rapid RPM changes and hard braking, especially when the engine is still cold. If you haven't been treating your car right, then the next secret will get you back on course. Secret number 6. General inspection every 6,200 miles. The Japanese Shaken inspection is so rigorous that many drivers who fail the tests don't bother trying to fix the car. It's often cheaper to just buy a new one. Those who can't afford to swap cars like flip-flops have to become semi-professional mechanics. Every 6,000 miles or once a year, perform a thorough check of your vehicle. For cars older than 8 years, you can perform this test every 6 months. This inspection involves checking belts for cracks, inspecting the color and level of all fluids and hoses for leaks. You'll also check the thickness of brake pads, tire pressure, and tread depth. You can do this inspection yourself, or pay a mechanic about $200. However, this is money well spent if you trust your mechanic. This test can prevent transmission replacement, engine rebuilds, and major tire problems that can endanger your life. If you think this is a little too cautious, wait until you see the next one. Secret number 5. Lubricate external moving parts. Did you know that a Japanese car can fail the Shaken inspection for being too noisy? We're not talking about performance mods like cold air intakes and aftermarket exhausts. We mean regular engine sounds due to old age. That is why their car owners are meticulous with car sounds, including squeaky hinges. However, this practice also ensures that moving parts don't wear out prematurely. Here's how it works. Every 3,000 miles, clean door hinges and apply white lithium grease. You can also do this to the hood and trunk latches, handbrake cables, and ball joints. Never use lithium grease on rubber bushings. Instead, spray AT205 Reseal. You can use this on all rubber parts of your car's suspension and all hoses to keep them supple and to prevent cracking. Proper lubrication can double the lifespan of suspension components like ball joints and sway bar links. This will save you thousands of dollars and cost less than $10. Secret number 4. Transmission fluid and filter change. At a staggering cost of almost $6,000, transmission failure is one of the most expensive car repairs. Here's the frustrating part. Transmissions are built to last up to 300,000 miles, but it rarely ever happens. That's because many people skip routine maintenance like transmission fluid and filter changes. Part of the reason is the so-called lifetime transmission fluids. This is one of the most controversial marketing terms, and one every expert has debunked. As a general rule, you should change transmission fluid and filter every 60,000 to 80,000 miles. However, for high-mileage cars, I recommend 30,000 to 50,000 miles. Replacing the transmission fluid and filter early will prevent premature wear of clutches, overheating, and contamination. This simple $500 maintenance habit will save you thousands of dollars and protect you from accidents. Can you imagine your transmission failing while you're on the highway? The only thing worse is what is coming up next. Secret number 3. Regular brake fluid flushes. According to the NHTSA, roughly 25% of crashes are due to failed or degraded brakes. And do you know what the leading cause of brake failure is? Owner neglect. Every driver knows that they need to change their brake pads once they start squealing. However, contaminated or leaking brake fluid is not as easy to diagnose. That is why it is often ignored, even when mechanics advise against it. This is extremely risky because brake fluid is hygroscopic, meaning it absorbs moisture over time. This can corrode brake lines, calipers, and ABS components. If you notice that your brakes are feeling spongy or the braking distance has diminished, you might need a flush. Flush and replace brake fluid every 2 years or 24,000 miles. On the other hand, brake pads should be replaced every 30,000 miles. When you need to replace old car parts, the next secret is critical. Secret number 2. Stick to OEM parts. According to the AAA, 78% of drivers choose aftermarket parts over OEM because of affordability and availability. On average, original equipment manufacturer parts cost between 20% to 50% more than aftermarket parts. That adds up when you're doing major engine repairs. However, aftermarket parts are cheaper for a reason. For starters, they have a high failure rate of up to 15%, compared to just 2% for OEM parts. But even when OEM parts fail, they often come with a warranty of at least 12 months. OEM parts will also fit your car precisely, last longer, and won't damage other components. Unfortunately, OEM parts aren't always available, especially for older models and less popular cars. Another advantage of aftermarket parts is that they have more variety. Plus, there are some components that don't need an OEM, like bulbs, belts, filters, and oil. If you can afford it, always buy OEM. But if you can't, look for reputable aftermarket manufacturers and never buy OEM from the dealer. Dealer markups can be as high as 50%, so order directly from the OEM manufacturer or online. But do you know what can save you the most money on this list? Secret number 1. Rust prevention through undercoating. Did you know that rust reduces the value of a car by up to 20%? With the average price of a used car now hovering around $32,000, that's a $6,000 hit, but that's only for mild rust. Extensive rust in critical areas like the suspension or transmission can make a car unsellable. If you live in an area with heavy winters or near the sea, rust can eat up your car in as little as 3 years. That is why you should apply a rust prevention undercoat every 2 years. But even then, you should still wash your undercarriage regularly, especially after driving on salted roads. You should also park in a garage and do a rust inspection once a year. This will prevent a $500 patch job from turning into a $10,000 repair. There you have it, 17 secrets that will turn you into a car inspection professional. These tips will not only save you a lot of money in repairs, but will also help your car last an unbelievably long time. But before you get too excited, you need to make sure you're not silently ruining your engine. So, watch this. 11 cheap parts no one replaces that destroy engines fast.